Okay, let's see. Good evening, everybody. I'm just logging in a little early for anybody who's there. And I'm just going to copy this link real quick. Okay. Morning, or good evening, Jim. How are you? Where are you driving to? Not that you should be texting while driving. I'm just kidding around. How are you, Jules? Let me see here. How's everybody going? How's everybody doing this evening so far? Just figure I'd log in a couple minutes early, say hello, and get this posted in a couple spots. Hello, Lashiva, Dallas, Holly, and you see our day. We're at day 25, if you can believe that. Just like that, we've almost gone through an entire month. It just goes by fast. And I hope everybody's getting a lot out of going over the Bible as much as I am. It's been a phenomenal thing to experience and go through day to day, versus just a little bit each week. I do think that it definitely seems to be have a lot more meaning and a lot more power behind it. It's going by super fast, and so I was talking to someone today about what's going to happen when a year goes by. What's going to be next? Is it going to be another religious text, or we're going to do the Bible again with maybe do it in a different order? So time will tell. So it's pretty interesting about the story of I do think that today's readings were definitely tied to what's happening in the world, in particular to a nation in Asia that we all know about. I'm not in the mood to get banned, so I think everybody's going to have to use their imagination on what nation in Asia would be committing crimes against humanity on a massive scale that are impacting everybody worldwide. So it's a really tough leap to come up with who it is. But for some reason, when you say the name, you get banned. But if you suggest the name, the algorithms don't seem to pick up on it as well. So use your imagination. I'm going to be discussing a nation in Asia that is inflicting a lot of damage on the earth, and that we have a lot of cleanup to do. But it's a nation that was brought together through corruption and was formed out of outright corruption and bribery. And so I'm doing okay, Clancy. How are you? And hi, John. Let me see. So Maria's on. So wonderful. I think with that, it is 8:30. So let's get into it. So basically, Genesis 50 was Joseph, threw himself on his father and wept over him. And this was after, Jacob had died. He decided, he did carry out Jacob's wishes, which were to be buried with his father Abraham, and back in he was buried in what is it here? He was buried in a cave that he had purchased, not who Jacob purchased, but they carried it to the land of, they brought Jacob back to the land of Canaan, buried him in a cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, and this is the cave that Abraham bought as a permanent burial site from Ephron the Hittite. So he did end up taking. He did fulfill Jacob's wishes. Joseph's brothers were extremely concerned when their dad died that somehow Joseph would would retaliate for what they had done to him. That maybe he was merciful because his dad was still alive. Joseph assured them that he wasn't going to do any harm to them. That it was God's will of what they did, and once again, if things didn't play out the way they did, who knows how many people would have died out. Would have died as a result of the actions not taken by Joseph to prepare Egypt for, the famine that would ultimately hit. Preparing for 7 years before the famine hit, and then obviously 7 years of famine, and then his brothers met him about 2 years into the famine, and then we know how the rest plays out. Joseph's family and his father, everybody moved to be with Joseph, I guess in Egypt, not in Egypt, but on the lands outside, because the Egyptians had a problem with the shepherds. And that's that. Joseph died pretty young, though. He only died. He died at 110. I'm not exactly sure, why he died at such a young age, relatively speaking. It seemed as though a lot of people seem to live to be 130, 150, 170 plus. So 110 was a pretty young age, but but in terms of he made good on his promise. He didn't do anything to harm his brothers, and his family was there, upon his death. So what's interesting is there was a really massive funeral that Joseph held for his dad, and all the Pharaoh's advisors, as well as a lot of the officials and household, Pharaoh's household, as well as senior officials, all participated in the funeral out of respect to Joseph, which I did think was kind of interesting, because the Egyptians didn't really care for the Jews. At least that's my understanding. And it was interesting that the Pharaoh did really look at Joseph as an equal, which is he said he would when he named him and gave him the authority that he had over life and death throughout Egypt and the surrounding areas. So even after the famine and everything that had happened, the Pharaoh stayed true to Joseph, because I think he realized that he was in fact blessed by God. So, the funeral procession that was held, it was definitely a sign that, Joseph was still in good standing with the Pharaoh, and that they had tremendous respect for everything that Joseph had done for the Egyptians. And, it's a testament to what he did. So now let's move forward to the Israel. Now we're into Exodus. So Exodus is like exiting Egypt, and some of you might have seen the movie with Charlton Heston, right? I think this was part of the theme with regards to Moses and the Ten Commandments and so forth. Exodus is the beginning of all those stories. And after Joseph ends up dying, a lot of the Egyptian leadership that took over, they didn't recognize or realize the importance that Joseph had in securing their future prosperity, and they kind of forgot about it. And sure enough, Joseph, and his descendants, as well as the descendants of his siblings, did continue to multiply, and they started to outnumber the Egyptians by a significant margin, which is what God said would happen. You will have as many, descendants as there are stars, right? If you recall. And so, obviously, power behaves in weird sort of ways. The Egyptians were worried that Joseph's descendants were accruing too much power and wealth in the area, so they decided to enslave the Jews, and they made them do a lot of physical labor, like really hard work, and they tried to break their spirit to basically, I'm assuming they tried to get them to leave, which ultimately they did leave, but they did try to have them stop producing. They wanted less children that were Jewish versus the Egyptians, or in I guess Hebrew, as they like to say, Jews, Hebrews, and so as they were trying to slow the population growth of the Jews in the area to keep more control over Egypt and the surrounding areas, they decided to take some drastic actions. And now this ties into the real world, folks. And so this drastic action that the Egyptians did was to order the execution of all the young male boys that were being born. And it was okay to keep the females alive, but they wanted the household servants to kill all the boys. And now, obviously they couldn't bring themselves to do this, which was good, but then they wanted them all to I think to kill them, kill the babies after they were born, and throw them into the Nile, right? So how does this apply to what's going on in the world? Okay, well, obviously someone just mentioned Planned Parenthood. I don't call it Planned Parenthood; it's Planned Parenthood. Since Planned Parenthood in the United States alone, since that went into effect, which corresponds, Roe v. Wade decision corresponds with opening up trade with China. So that's why I'm saying I don't think it's a coincidence, but there's been a lot of evil forces controlling this country for a very long time that as they opened up trade with China to try to use slave labor there, they simultaneously convinced Americans, as well as other nations worldwide, that it's okay to slaughter the most innocent among us, i.e. our youth, our babies. And since Roe v. Wade, not only have Americans suffered economically from this distorted global trade, we've lost well over 60 million babies. So not only we sell off our future generations' ability to earn and create on U.S. soil, we simultaneously allowed these evil people to encourage some of the rungs of society that might have felt desperate to make such a horrific decision, and kill off their own child. There's postpartum depression that women sometimes suffer after they have a child, and I think there's a lot of research that actually shows that there's prepartum depression. So there's women that are depressed prior to the baby being born because of all the hormones and so forth. And I did a survey once on Twitter, and I was a little shocked. And this is one, before I got banned. I'm at 5,000 plus followers again, but I think I had like 50 to 100,000 followers when I did this survey. And surprisingly, Twitter didn't ban me on this survey. But what I basically asked, I was just curious to see if anybody would respond. I said, for any women out there who have had an abortion, I asked a couple questions. I said, do you regret the decision? Please provide an honest answer. Do you regret the decision? Were you suffering from depression? Before you had the baby, so to speak. And, I think no. And then one of the answers was no. And then I think the fourth one I did was depression, and, they had the abortion and so forth. And I was shocked that over 50% of the women who said they had an abortion were suffering from depression. And that's a really alarming number, because can you imagine if someone was suffering from depression, they went to go see a doctor, and the doctor gave them a suicide pill and said, kill yourself? We would be outraged if we found out that the medical profession or other human beings among us were answering somebody's cry for help by saying they were depressed with a suicide pill. Well, in some respects, this is what these sick, evil people have done to women and young families by saying, look, you're suffering from depression. This is going to be stressful, but don't worry about it. Slaughter your baby and everything will be okay. And we let this happen for over 40 years. And as a result of this happening, you think about, this is why I think it's tied to China China continued to expand its population. U.S. was slaughtering its population. If you're China and you're looking out 100 years, what better way to try to take over the United States than to take over the United States with 200 million fewer Americans? So over that 40-year period, because of over 60 million abortions, there's probably 200 million fewer Americans on U.S. soil. We could have been a nation of 500 million people. And instead, we're a nation of about 300 million. I think the numbers are overstated. So I think it's closer to 300 million, not 330. But our enemy, the enemy of Judeo-Christian values, the enemy of freedom, of independence, of God, God loving human beings on this earth, the shining beacon on a hill for the planet, where independent spirits from all around the planet want to be in the United States. These sick, evil people, in collusion with other sick, evil people that were operating on U.S. soil, probably some of these globalists behind the scenes, they had convinced not only 60 plus million Americans to kill their babies, over 60 million Americans were slaughtered, but other nations around the world. Now, what's interesting about this, when you combine it with the fact that China likes to kill their daughters, they don't kill their sons, they kill their daughters. And actually, when I was in graduate school, I did a case study on the ethical dilemma facing a healthcare company that was selling ultrasound equipment to China, and actually it was also to India. So they were selling this equipment to China and India. And in India, the big thing is dowry. So a lot of poor people they wanted to kill their babies if they were little girls, because tradition called for a dowry. And if they couldn't afford a dowry, they would kill their baby, which is a horrible situation that culturally people in India would kill their daughter over just ditching the tradition. I would have been like, you know what? This dowry tradition's got to go to the way of the dodo bird. Get this shit out of here. And so they didn't do that. And so the case was, even if this medical equipment was used for good reasons, for good causes in China and India, should the company still sell it if over half of the equipment would be used to slaughter girls, essentially? And I was shocked, because I thought it was a no-brainer that you just don't sell them the equipment. And there was a lot of people in the class that argued the argument won out to sell the equipment, that they've been brainwashed into this concept that you have to make a profit at all costs, and it's not their place to judge, which is the globalist mantra. Go do business with other countries, even if they violate our values and our beliefs, as long as you can make a buck off of it. And I happen to strongly disagree with that. I think the United States should end all trade with any nation that violates the rights of women. I actually emailed the White House, and I got a message to Ivanka Trump through her email a couple of years ago, I think almost 4 years ago. I said, I even came up with a slogan for it. It should be called WOW, Women of the West. So the WOW movement, women of the United States, women of Canada, of Europe, basically exercise their economic power. They make over 80% of the economic decisions, with homes, with cars, with major expenses in this economy. Believe it or not, men, women are the ones that call the shots in terms of like doing the research, and you can be mad at me, but that's the reality. Women kind of control the purse strings about how money is spent in our economy. And so my attitude was, women, if they call the shots, they should say, you know what? We don't want to buy any money from any nations where they violate women's rights. So if they don't want to allow women to have an education, no problem. We're not buying anything from you until you do. And hit them in their pocketbook. And then you know what? You want to make women kind of act as though they're being held hostage and suffering from Stockholm syndrome and cover themselves and not be able to see anybody. No problem. We're not buying anything from you either. And you just systematically live our values. And I think women could really make a huge, they can really make sure that this evil is reversed. And one thing I will tell you is that what if women did do this in the United States as well as in Europe, and they demanded more women's rights worldwide in nations that we trade with as a requisite, not as a nice to have, but an absolute must. I think there would be fewer wars, period, because women that have a voice in a society are much less likely to agree to send their children to war. And so it's an absolutely there's wonderful other benefits from doing this. But going back to this whole situation with China, so China's killing their daughters, and from a genetics perspective, a lot of these men in China that turn out to be, I guess, boys, and then I guess maybe they're man boys because they eat so much soy. I'm not sure, but a lot of these men, there's a shortage of women. So China basically creates a situation where the men within the nation go to the surrounding areas of Asia, and a lot of the genetic material is passed from the male to females. And so this is why the Egyptians were slaughtering the males with regards to they wanted them slaughtered. In this story, during the story of Exodus, the Chinese are keeping the males alive and slaughtering their daughters instead, so that then their young men could leave China and go try to find women in other societies and literally try to breed out the other groups. It sounds insane. I get it, but that's their playbook, folks. And that's what they've been doing. They've literally attempted to try to dominate other societies by spreading the males across those societies as a result of creating shortages by these corrupt, evil policies on their own soil. Nations around the world should refuse to allow all these men to come in from different countries by themselves, especially when those countries are following these type of distorted evil policies where they're okay killing their daughters, but then they send their men overseas to try to take over a society by I guess having children with that other society because there's a shortage of women in their own society that was manufactured by a corrupt regime within that government. So that's what came to mind as I was reading this, because they took the playbook from Exodus, and the Egyptians wanted to kill the boys because of this. Probably the Egyptians were worried about the Jewish boys, taking Egyptian women as wives and then overrunning the Egyptian territory. So that's why they wanted them slaughtered. And so this still goes on today. I know it's hard to fathom that this is happening, but it's been happening for a very long time. This isn't just something that happened in the past 5 years. It's been going on for probably well over 50 years, probably a couple hundred years at this point. And so, we should do our part to try to stop this insanity, and encourage our daughters not to pair up with people that are atheists is a good start, and keep them away from people that come from bad stock, as they say, in the Bible. We need to we do need to set up a long game. I agree with you, Celicia. We have to start getting our act together and speaking our values, learning the Bible, teaching our youth how to become independent. Because if we don't, we really are going to collapse. No amount of prayer is going to help if we don't take action in the real world as well. Prayer can help protect us, help guide us, but at the end of the day, we do have to, we do have to get this going. Where does abortion fit into this nowadays? Well, abortion still taking place, but the number of abortions has dropped significantly. I think the number of abortions in the United States is down probably 30 or 40%, which is great, but it's still 600,000 plus babies are being killed each year. So that's not so great. It's still a tremendous amount, and worldwide the numbers are even worse. And so that's that with Exodus. Okay. Let's see. So then this is the story about Moses with regards to a woman became pregnant, had a son, put him in a basket, and then the Pharaoh's sister ended up picking up the baby from the basket in the Nile River. I'm sorry. Pharaoh's daughter, not the sister. Pharaoh's daughter ended up seeing the baby, took the baby in, started to raise it, and then the mother of the baby, of Moses, ended up taking care of the baby. So she was able to still help raise Moses and then have the baby protected from being slaughtered. And if you recall, if I'm not mistaken, there had to be, an offering, and maybe it's in the next Exodus, above the door with regards to blood to prevent the spirit from coming over and killing the babies, killing the males. I think I'm getting this mixed up. It might be in the next couple versions, but anyways, this story is about Moses, basically being born, being raised by the Pharaoh's daughter, and then obviously we all know what happens with Moses over time. Moses turns around and gets the 10 Commandments from God, as well as leads the Jews out of Egypt after they've been persecuted and such. So there you go, Passover. That's right. So I forgot where Passover is, which part of the Bible. I'm assuming it's somewhere in Exodus, but I guess we'll get to it maybe in the next few days. Worldwide rally for peace and freedom on 3/20 over 40 countries. Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, Passover is next week. We didn't even plan it out that way. So maybe we're going to get to it in the next few days as Passover is about to hit. Okay. So when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say is the Son of Man?" And then some said, "It's John the Baptist." Some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah. "But who do you say I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And so Jesus replied, "You are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. Now I say to you that you are Peter," which means rock, "and upon this rock I will build my church." This is the basis of Roman Catholicism, by the way. "And all of the powers of hell will not conquer it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." This is why the statue of Peter has the keys. Whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven, and whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven. So, Peter is supposed to be the protector of the Word of God, and I know some Christians from other denominations of Christianity don't like to hear this, but this is why the Roman Catholic Church considers itself the core trunk of Christianity, is because of this part of this passage of the Bible in which Jesus hands over the keys of the kingdom to Peter, and Peter to hold, to protect and be responsible for the Word of God after Jesus leaves this earth, in the physical form, that is. Jesus is always here in spirit, but in terms of the physical form, this is what Peter was tasked with accomplishing. So then Jesus turns to Peter and says, "Get away from me." Hold on one second. Peter took aside and began to reprimand him. One second. What is going on here? Let's see here. Okay, so from then Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders and the leading priests, and that he would be killed, but on the third day he would rise from the dead. Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him. Heaven forbid, Lord, this will never happen to you. Jesus turned to Peter and said, Get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. Then Jesus said to his disciples, If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? For the Son of Man will come with the angels in his glory, in the glory of his Father, and will judge all people according to their deeds. And I tell you the truth, some standing here now will not die before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So, it's obviously this is a really meaningful part of Christianity, and a lot of people talk about it with regards to you have to give up your own way and take up your own cross, right, and follow the truth. And we live in a world that is surrounded by vice, right? There's virtue and there's vice. So Jesus is basically calling on us to try to live a virtuous, righteous life. And that's not always easy to do. We're surrounded by so many things we know we shouldn't do. You can just think about, I know I probably sound like a broken record, but I always like to go to the 7 deadly sins. It's, the 7 deadly sins really sum up a lot of great historical stories, books of the human condition. Sometimes people are lustful, and they cross the line that they shouldn't, right? And they cheat on their spouse. People sometimes are too greedy, and they want more than they need, but they just want more just for the sake of having it. Then there's people that are envious, and so you can examine those things. And when you read this statement and you think about this, you have to give up your own way. The own way is maybe it's not you per se, just as how you view the world, but how human beings tend to operate. That we're kind of born with some of these little I don't even want to call them pet peeves, but these little these imperfections that Jesus is trying to help us see for what they are and to correct them, rather than let them destroy us. And the way you can keep them from destroying you is by reading and filling your mind and your spirit with stories about the consequences of these types of actions. When you don't live in harmony, you don't live in balance, you don't live following the truth of how you should live your life. And that's my takeaway from it, is that we all know what we're supposed to do most of the time, but it's the discipline to actually do it. And the way you get discipline is through repetition. And once again, I haven't said a rosary lately online, but I do still say them. I haven't done them publicly, but I did a rosary for Linwood, and he's not Roman Catholic, and I did one for Monica, Matthews of Georgia, and she said, Bobby, I don't believe in the rosary either. So both of them kind of told me they don't believe in the rosary, and I explained to them. I said, that's okay. I'll still pray for you. You don't have to say the rosary. Maybe I'll say a little bit of it for you. But when I explained to them about the rosary and why it's such a powerful tradition and so forth, even though some people don't like the idea of Mary being involved, right? With the Hail Marys and such. As I said, it's the repetition. It's just literally it's like weight training. You can go and bench one time, right? You can do squats, at the gym one time. You could pick up a barbell one time. But when you do them, sets of 10, right? You do a set of 10. You do a set of 10. You strengthen your muscle. Well, sometimes when you say a rosary and you go through 5 sets of 10 Hail Marys, it's kind of like weight training of a different sort. It's a spiritual training. So sometimes if you do the repetition and you think about each Hail Mary for its in and of its own right, and what you're praying for with each Hail Mary, and you do that repetition, I do believe it strengthens your resolve and your discipline to stay the course. And so, that's my take on it. And that's why I don't think it's a waste of time. And I know that some people think it's maybe a little bizarre or not necessary. But for me, I think it's pretty powerful from that perspective, that it does a really good job of just getting you to, slow things down, slow the pace down, and just focus on something that is not just going to clear your mind, but strengthen your spirit. And so that's my takeaway from it. But it kind of ties into the story. That's why I thought I'd share it. So 6 days later, Jesus took Peter and the 2 brothers, James and John, and led them up a high mountain to be alone. As the men watched, Jesus' appearance was transformed so that his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as light. Suddenly Moses and Elijah appeared and began talking with Jesus. Peter exclaimed, "Lord, it's wonderful for us to be here. If you want, I'll make 3 shelters as memorials, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." But even as he spoke, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my dearly loved son, who brings me great joy. Listen to him." The disciples were terrified and fell face down on the ground. Then Jesus came over and touched them. "Get up, don't be afraid." And then he looked up. Moses and Elijah were gone, and they only saw Jesus. And they went down the mountain. Jesus commanded them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." So that's pretty interesting. To see Moses and Elijah, I'm not sure what to think of it. I thought, obviously they must have seen the ghost, is what I'm thinking. You guys have any thoughts on that one with regards to Moses and Elijah on the mountain? I just don't remember reading about this or hearing about this one in church. Anyone? So when I hear the scripture, I forget about the daily verses. I agree. So if anybody can think about Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, and what the meaning of that was, and so forth, if it had any other significance other than all 3 of them were together for a particular reason that we'll find out later. Elijah prophets, Moses the laws, Jesus satisfied them both. I think they were a ghost, but so Elijah is the devotion and spirit, both foreshadowing Christ in our lives. So, I'll have to look into this one a little more. I do agree with you, KP, that Elijah, I think Moses was a prophet too, though, but he did get the laws from God, in particular the 10 Commandments, but Elijah was more of a prophet. And then, Jesus wasn't really providing us with laws. Jesus was basically saying, here are the lessons, and here's the truth for how you can live a righteous life. But it wasn't codified into laws, more of like a guidebook. And that's why I kind of view the Bible as a phenomenal, collection, even if you're not religious, of how to live a good, decent life. Yeah, Moses was also a prophet too. I agree. I satisfied the law and he gave the Holy Spirit. So I'm gonna look into it some more and see if somebody has a write-up as to how the three are connected. Because I really just don't remember the three of them being together. I'd like to see if anybody's kind of investigated that in more detail. Okay, so we're on to Psalms 21. How the king rejoices in your strength, O Lord. He shouts with joy because you give him victory. For you have given him his heart's desire. You have withheld nothing he requested. You welcomed him back with success and prosperity. You placed a crown of finest gold on his head. He asked you to preserve his life, and you granted his request. The day of his life stretch on forever. The days of his life stretch on forever. Your victory brings him great honor, and you have clothed him in splendor and majesty. You have endowed him with eternal blessings and given him the joy of your presence. For the king trusts in the Lord. The unfalling love of the Most High will keep him from stumbling. You will capture all your enemies. Your strong hand will seize all who hate you. You will throw them in the flaming furnace when you appear. The Lord will consume them in his anger. Fire will devour them. You will wipe their children from the face of the earth, and they will never have descendants, although they plot against you. Their evil schemes will never succeed, for they will turn and run when they see your arrows aimed at them. Rise, O Lord, in all your power. With music and singing, we celebrate your mighty acts. And so I think there's a lot of people in this country right now that would really like to see this psalm play out. I think would really like to see, Lord Jesus Christ take out the evil that is surrounding and infesting this entire country, this entire planet, how they've connived and schemed to enslave billions of people around the world, and do it with a smile, and do it through mechanisms that make them appear as though they're doing things in the best interest of people, which we know is not true. They're very good at covering up their crimes through co-opting the very institutions that we put trust into. We've seen this everywhere. We've seen it in the way our Justice Department behaves, our school system. They've infected the military. They've infected every level of government, our corporations, just everything. It's really disturbing. And I guess we let our guard down. We didn't train a new generation of gatekeepers, so to speak, or had more active citizenship and more active Christians. I think we've been too lax as Christians, just as though we've been we've been lacking active citizenship in this country for some time, and that's bit us in the ass. And we've also been lacking active Christianity, and I guess you could say Christianity, Judaism, other religions. We have not taken an active stance in living our values publicly. And because Satan and people that are Satanists out there basically convinced us to not speak about religion and politics, right? That's the big lie. Don't talk about what you care about and how you want to solve problems with people in your community, and how you can maybe address some of these issues by discussing lessons from the Bible. There's no reason that we have to try to recreate the wheel. We should look to the Bible for some of the greatest lessons ever explained and taught for thousands of years. I'm not exactly sure what this infatuation is with not invented here syndrome. If there's great ideas that work in the Bible, work in other communities, work in other states, work in other countries, why don't we incorporate them here? I think we should get into that habit of taking the best ideas from people that have come up with them, acknowledge them, thank them for sharing those ideas. We're all children of God, and if somebody has ideas that can be used for good, what greater way of honoring God than by doing more good with those ideas? And I think that if we start to move back in that direction, which I think we are, and we start to put God first, we start to openly discuss our faith and why we have it and how it relates to our view of the world. And, so we should speak up against the evil that we see on TV, like what just happened on the award ceremony a couple days ago. It's they have no problem being, they're not bashful at all of expressing their satanic views of how they should live through this world, and they constantly try to recruit more people to live their ways. And so we need to actually create a narrative and fight back and say something. Praying in restaurants, we always say grace in restaurants, and I think it's good. I think everybody should say grace and thank a meal, and when guests come over. I always tell guests, I'm doing grace. You don't have to participate, but I'm going to do it anyways. So if somebody comes over to the house that doesn't believe in grace before meals and such. So, okay. So now we are, this is Proverbs 5. My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Listen carefully to my wise counsel. Then you will show discernment, and your lips will express what you've learned. For the lips of an immoral woman are as sweet as honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is bitter as poison, as dangerous as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. For she cares nothing about the path to life. She staggers down a crooked trail and doesn't realize it. And so, I guess he's talking. I guess with this story, he's talking about people that live an immoral life. We've kind of talked about that with Hollywood and with a lot of these actors and actresses and so forth that have infected our society. There seems to be this delusion that sets in where, if enough people think it's okay in our larger society, if enough people have kind of decided to live an immoral life, that somehow that makes it okay. And nothing could be further from the truth. When that type of temptation comes and people want to stray, either men or women in a relationship, that they, especially if they're married, it isn't okay, and you should obviously, it's not for anybody who does feel that way. They should definitely pray. They should seek counseling, seek help, but the ramifications to not just your soul, but the ramifications to the other person involved, the ramifications to your children, to your community, they're off the charts. And so you owe it to all of the fallout that occurs by, one of the 7 deadly sins, lust. Fix your marriage, fix your relationship, instead of, breaking a commitment that you had with somebody once you've kind of gone down that path. And that's not a really popular thing in a world where people celebrate Tinder and celebrate, apps like, apps that encourage people that are married to cheat on their spouse and not get caught. Based out of Canada, there was one that was doing this, and it's pretty bad. Once again, bolder and bolder and more obvious, and getting people to pause and stop and look at the consequences for their own life over time, as well as the life of their children. Hopefully it will help reverse this tide and stop this type of behavior from being so accepted and widespread. We have to kind of work it back, as quickly as we can, but hopefully people that have participated in it, I have no doubt that they're forgiven. By God, they have to forgive themselves and the people that they might have hurt in the process, and then work to stay on the straight and narrow path, as they say, and staying on the right path, or an honorable path and a righteous path, so to speak. I do believe that it's easier when you actually take the time to pray, and you take the time to reflect and read these stories and so forth. And so, that's what I think. And so I agree, John. They are trying to make it seem as though it's unattainable, but I do believe that if you find the right person and you are married, your spirit does merge with theirs. I do believe that, and that there is an energetic connection that occurs, and that you rewire each other's brains. I think the science is proving this out. And on this note, with regards to people that cheat, and I don't know why, I never read this anywhere, but I do believe that when people cheat, or people are overly promiscuous, as they like to say, that especially for women that are overly promiscuous, the genetic material, I think I read this years ago, I'm not sure, I don't know the scientific proof of this, but the genetic material of men, when it enters a woman, it permanently attaches into a woman's brain. It just kind of rewires their DNA. So even if they don't have a child with that man, the DNA of that man permanently enters into that woman's mind. That's really, it's crazy if this is true. I don't know if it's true. It's kind of tough. It's a tough subject to research. But if you think about, a virus, when a virus enters the body, it gets into every cell. If it's a virus, it can get into every cell, and it replicates itself through our DNA, like how we rebuild our blood and so forth. Well, if the genetic material enters through sperm into a female, and it gets into the bloodstream, which is very possible, and that bloodstream goes into the woman's brain, and this genetic material lodges into the mechanism of how additional cells are replicated and so forth, then women are, in a sense, anybody that they do, have relations with in that regard, they're carrying around all the genetic material of all those different men. I know it sounds a little crazy, and I guess the same holds true for men that are with men, I guess. But if that's happening, think about how you would change as a woman if you pick partners that are faulted, that have a lot of faults. I guess you can say that maybe that's how, those faults might show up in women after they've been with certain men. I don't know. Does it rewire your perception and your ability to make decisions? I have no idea. I'm just saying that this is something that, if it's true, which I think there's a good chance that it is, it should really be studied more thoroughly. It should be explained to young women in our society. I have 3 young daughters, even if this isn't true, and I don't know for sure, right? It's just, I don't know the science. But if it isn't true, I'm going to put it out there as a possibility to discourage my daughters from being, overly promiscuous. I'd be like, look, I had that philosophy when I was a young man, that I didn't want to have any sort of relations with a woman unless I really thought that I can have a more serious relationship with them. It's a pretty simple, pretty straightforward standard I had. I didn't like to sleep around just with anybody. I just assumed that if I was going to sleep with them, I would not mind being stuck with them. It's a crazy concept, and but I think that sometimes it's not sometimes. Majority of the time, it's lost now, and people are demeaning the value of sex. And maybe this would help maybe cause people to pause a little bit if it's true. It's true according to a book I mentioned above. Elisheva said, let me see here. Okay, so you've read it as well. The Alchemy of Love and Lust. There you go. I'll have to check it out. So I guess, maybe somebody's already started to prove all this out scientifically. I know I came across it a few years ago. I just don't know where. I just know that it's been stuck in my head ever since. that's part of it. Was just a joke. Anyways, with that being said, thank you everybody for joining me this evening with going over the Bible. I hope I hope God blesses you, blesses your family and friends, and I hope God continues to bless the greatest nation in the history of the world. May peace be with you. And if you don't have peace, I do believe that if we continue to put God first, our peace will continue to grow, and anybody who doesn't have it will find it. So, with that said, have a wonderful evening. Thank you. I was just reading some other comments. So, awesome. Well, Lashiva, thank you for the book recommendations. I will definitely see if I can check it out and see if I can report back on some of the findings in there. Have a nice evening, everybody.